This thing on? Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Because I'm about the same height as the speaker, so if you can't see me, then you got to move your seat. We're very, very excited to have everyone here tonight, and very, very blessed that we're going to have this really, really remarkable teacher with us, Michael Paley, for not only tonight, but for the next several days, and thrilled to have this world-class teacher with us for the second installment of our Wisdom and Wonder series. I was just at a meeting today and yesterday in Chicago with Rabbi Dr. Michael Marmer, who was our first Wisdom and Wonder speaker, and he told me to say hi to all of you. He misses you terribly. So we're very, very excited that we're going to have Michael with us. We're going to introduce him in a moment, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what else is going to be in store for us this weekend. So for those who are going to join us tomorrow night for services and then for our dinner program that will follow, that program is going to be talking a little bit about Jewish innovation and resilience. In 1967, Professor Shimon Ravidovich wrote a very famous, often quoted and misquoted article called "Israel, the Ever-Dying People." And this article was published 10 years after he was an actually dying person who died in the 1950s. But the 1950s had been a time of Jewish optimism. And around the Six-Day War, fear had returned to the Jewish community. How many of you can remember those weeks leading up to the Six-Day War in the 1960s and how terrifying those moments were? It's remarkable. The late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time, was so afraid of what he thought was about to happen that he literally had a nervous breakdown in the days just immediately before the Six-Day War. And the chief rabbi of Jerusalem actually went around the city without telling anybody and consecrated all of the public parks as Jewish cemeteries because they were so afraid there wasn't going to be enough to accommodate the losses they thought they would sustain. And then, of course, we know what happened following that war. And that essay, which didn't imagine the kind of success and strength that we have realized since that time, focused on how every generation of Jews feels like they're the last ones. That anti-Semitism, pogroms, expulsions, assimilation were always about to overcome us. And in our times, we're no different, right? How many of you Schreigewalt about this is the end times of the Jewish people, right? We all kind of feel that same angst. And so how is it that even in the midst of all of the challenges that we faced in the last 100 years, the Jewish people has not only survived, but thrived? And that's going to be a bit of what Rabbi Paley is going to explore with us tomorrow evening. And then at Shabbat morning Torah study at 9:30 on Saturday morning, we're going to be led with a fantastic discussion called The Magic Staff and the Decreation of Egypt. I would tell you more about that, but it's not going to be fun. It's going to be much more fun if you come with that fantastic title and join us. So we really, really hope for those who want to join us in person, tomorrow night's service will obviously be here, and dinner will be actually in this space tomorrow night. And then Saturday morning, we will be in the Beit Midrash. You are welcome to come in person because the bagels taste better in person. But if you'd like to join us online, if you go to the temple's website, you can find the Zoom link and the live stream link, and you can either watch in a participatory fashion as we offer every single week for Torah study on Saturdays by Zoom, or you can watch from afar through live stream, and we won't know you're there. So you're free to talk about us behind our backs. But we're very, very blessed to have Rabbi Paley with us. It's my privilege to invite Richard Cohen, who is one of the senior leaders of the American Jewish Committee, who has helped sponsor having Rabbi Paley here to offer an introduction for him tonight. You can applaud him. He's a really nice guy.
Thank you, Rabbi Dan. It's a great honor to be here to introduce Rabbi Paley to our congregation. Rabbi Paley is from Brookline, Massachusetts. He was educated, there go Brookline. He was educated at Brandeis, the University of Pennsylvania, and Temple University. He was, at 27 years old, hired on the faculty at Dartmouth College, where he taught Islam, and later became the chaplain at Columbia University. Currently, Rabbi Paley is with the JDC. He has been in Budapest for the last 7 years, which is where I met him through American Jewish Committee a little over 3 years ago, when he led what he called a Brigadoon Shabbat service for us in Budapest. And then we went to dinner together and had dinner tonight, and he is one of the most fascinating dinner table companions you could meet. He's a scholar, he's a mensch, and I think we will all enjoy hearing from him. So without further ado, Rabbi Michael Paley.
Before Rabbi Paley begins, I forgot, we're going to be passing out, you may have taken them as you came in, but we'll be passing out index cards and pens, so if you have questions when Rabbi Paley is finished, we'll be collecting those cards, and that way we'll be able to do a little bit of organized Q&A.
Well, thank you for that warm introduction and the warm introduction to the whole weekend, and of course the Brookline shout-outs. You know, I want to really appreciate that. You know, Brookline goes with you wherever you go, and so I want to recognize that. Not much Islam in Brookline when I was growing up, but I'm really happy to be here. I'm really honored to be in this community, in this great place, and to meet all of you. I'm not foreign to Boca. I came and taught the Wexner groups here in David Pratt's office and in other places, so I'm happy to see my friends who even can remember some of my stories. So, you know, like, that's a big thing. So, and I do want to talk about Islam for a few different reasons. If there's a theme of the weekend, it's a reawakening, right? That we are, as human beings, in a time of tremendous change, and it's affecting all of us. It's affecting Jews who now have a state and power and an army and things like that, and it's affecting Islam. Which is more dramatically changed than it's almost ever been in the history of Islam, and I just want to reflect on that a little bit. When I was about 21 years old, my father wanted to know what I was going to do. You know, like we had the talk. You know, Michael, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go to the. It's such a funny story. I'm going to go to the University of Pennsylvania and study Islam. And my father, you know, this is like, this is in the 90s, he says, but no one will be interested in that. Like, it's just, it's not a topic that will catch you. Nobody knows about Islam. Nobody cares about Islam. Do something, you know, make a living. So I said, well, I don't know. I'm gonna do it anyways, and I believe that I'll be able to make a living. He was wrong. You know, like it's caught our attention, wouldn't you say? Islam. When I was a kid, when all of us were kids, most of the Jews in the world lived in Christendom, right? They lived in America, they lived in Europe, they lived in places like that. But if you think of Israel as surrounded by Islamic countries with a significant Islamic population, and you think of the Jews that are still living in Islamic lands, you would say that nearly a majority, or maybe already a majority, of Jews now live surrounded by Muslims and integrated. And in America also, it's a much more a vibrant community. We see it's included in a way that I never would have expected. Before 9/11, I was the university chaplain at Columbia University, which is not the Hill director, but I was in charge of the religious communities. And and including the baccalaureate. And I brought the baccalaureate program to the president of the university, Michael Sovereign, and he said, why do you have an Islamic name among the speakers? And I said, because of the Muslims on the campus. He said, but it's in St. Paul's Chapel. They'll never come in. And I said, I'm doing it anyways. They may not come in this year. Maybe they'll come in next year. He thought I was out of my mind. The next year he apologized to me. He said, no, that was right. And it changed it. And it, in some ways, invested in the multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural university in a way that is started then and has really taken issue and become even more divisive now. So that's my little thing. I'm going to try and accomplish a few things. I'm going to try and say something about early Islam and the prophet of Islam, Muhammad. I'm going to try and say something about the beginning of the history of Islam, and then I'm going to try and relate it to the modern period, and I'll have you out of here by 8:30, something like that. So it's a tall order, and we'll struggle on together. Good? Okay. When I was 20 years old, 1972, I'd like to note in parenthesis that 1972 might have been the best time to be 20 years old in human history if you were a teenage boy from Brookline. So, and I decided I would take my semester abroad in Jerusalem. So I went on the plane. Fabulous, right? The whole plane, because we were the boomers, the whole plane was filled with Jews my age going to Israel for the semester without our parents. I mean, it was really amazing. And it was 1972. And 1972 was before the 1973 war and a certain interval of time after the 67 war, so that unlike any other time, the whole country, including the West Bank and Gaza, were open. My brother came to visit me, and we spent a week at the beach in Gaza. No problem, right? No problem. At a place called Yamit that doesn't even exist anymore, that was plowed under. We would go to Jenin to go and buy the special soap that you could get from Jenin with the olive oil in them. We would go to Shechem and walk through the back souks. It was a remarkable time, and it was an extremely optimistic time. It's hard to remember that now, how optimistic it was. And I, as an unattached 20-year-old, was also quite optimistic. So, it was like a Tuesday, and we couldn't move into Shikanoi LF, which was the dormitories for overseas students. Right? You stayed there. Yeah. What a beautiful place. Really a place to warm your heart at the Hebrew University. And so we came on a Tuesday night, and we couldn't move in until Wednesday night. So I said to the people on the plane, where are we staying? And they said, we're staying at the Petra Hotel, right inside the Jaffa Gate, and you can stay there for 75 cents a night. 75 cents a night. Even I, from Brookline, could. 75 cents. So and it'll be great. We'll have a party. Fabulous. So around 5 o'clock that night, I go to the Petra Hotel. Sure enough, you go to the front desk, and they say 75 cents. They give you a mat. You go to the roof, and there are hundreds of people like me on the roof, staking out their place, and we're having a party on the roof of the Petra Hotel. And the Petra Hotel, right over the Dome of the Rock. I mean, nothing could have been more picturesque. Around 2 o'clock in the morning or 3, something like that, I decide to drift off to sleep, put my mat out, I go to sleep, and around 4 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, Allahu Akbar. There had been a kind of corroded blue speaker in the corner of the top of the Petra Hotel, which we did not take notice of until that moment, when the volume that came out of it was so great that we almost kind of got blown off the roof of the Petra Hotel. And then we found out why they said you can stay on the roof of the Petra Hotel for 75 cents. And they didn't say sleep on the roof Petra. So for the next hour, we listened to the person I now know is a muadhin. A muadhin is the person that chants the morning prayer. And he chanted it good and proper, and they were annoyed. But I have to tell you, of all the experiences in my life, it's almost the most identifiable experience, which is that the prayers went into my heart. They just went into my heart. The sound, I didn't know what they were about. I hardly knew anything about Islam. I knew that Maimonides had written about Islamic philosophers. I was interested in knowing who they were. Ibn Rushd and Ibn Sina and Ibn Bajjah and al-Biruni, all these people, but I didn't know really anything about it. And yet I found myself transported by this moment. So I go to the railing facing the Dome of the Rock, and I look in all the roofs of the Muslim quarter of the old city of Jerusalem are packed with people. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And at a certain moment, almost kind of like a school of fish changing directions, boom, they all prostrate themselves. And I said, this is like, I came to study religion and science. I'm stunned by this. And so I decided I'm going to do it myself, right? All the other 20-year-olds, they said, look what a crazy person. He's bowing down, he's prostrating himself, and I am prostrating myself like it's Yom Kippur, And they're coming over to me and making fun of me, and they're doing it like right above me. Because first of all, we've been drinking the whole night, and second of all, it's a funny thing to do, right? What does the word Islam mean? It means submission. It means even surrender, right? I'm going to surrender. I'm going to lie flat on my face. I'm not going to worry about the people over me. I'm going to surrender my soul in some ways to God, right? I'm going to submit. Yeah. By the way, we're Jews, right? How are we at submission? Yeah, that's not our long suit. Yeah, in my family, we don't submit to what we're having for breakfast, or maybe even where. We struggle out, Is it the porch? Is it the roof? We know. But in this moment, I did feel that, because it was impossible not to feel it, right? I have no other understanding of it. And this, in some ways, when I went to register for my classes, I think 2 or 3 days later, I registered for Islam, right? And so that was the beginning of a journey for me. And that journey was really in 2 different fashions. It was academic, right? I studied the scientific genius of the Muslims of the Middle Ages, but I also studied the Muslim street and real Muslims. In fact, at a certain point, I stopped only going to class, and I started to go into the Arab villages, which in 1972 and 3 you could still do, and try and really understand and feel what it meant to be part of that. So that's kind of why I got into this, and now I want to tell you a few things. Where does Islam begin? Maybe there's group participation, right? Mecca, right? Which is a real, Mecca. And what's the economic infrastructure of Mecca? You can figure it out, right? What's that? Hajj is, only once a year, but it's a big one. I agree. They make a lot of money in that. But it's a religious pilgrimage site before the Prophet lives, right? The Prophet is born in 570 to a tribe called the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. Before he's even born, it's a holy site, right? Many people thought in the early medieval world. Remember, we're only talking about 570 after the Common Era. We're not talking about 2,000 years ago. We're not talking about 3,000 years ago. It's a historical event, right? There was a house until just a few years ago in Medina where the Prophet had actually lived. He lived in the first mosque. He had his wives there. He did all sorts of things. We don't doubt his existence. We can see the impact of his life. So it's a recent 1,400 and some year old phenomenon. Its origins are not buried in the distant past. Okay. So what was the economic infrastructure? Like if you go to Rome or if you go to Benares or Varanasi in India, in other holy sites, tchotchke business, right? You know what tchotchke is? For you, I have a beautiful mother of pearl cross. Oh, you're a Jew. For you, I have a beautiful mother of pearl star. like that. That's what you say. Souvenirs, mugs. My favorite now, magnets, because my mug collection overtook the house. So the magnets, I visited, Mecca and I saw the Kaaba, or I went to the well of Zamzam, which is the well that Hagar and Ishmael drank from, and all I got was this T-shirt. Those are the kind of things, right? So and it was a pagan shrines. So many different religions were there. Good for business or bad for business? Many different religions. Could be good, right? I mean, after all, more religions, more pilgrimages, right? More pilgrimages, more tchotchkes, more money. And it's good, right? And the different tribes, they like their territory. You know, if you ever go to a big market around a holy place, you'll see that people stake out their little plot. But there's some bad part of it also, because these were different religions. So the more religions, what else would you say? The more conflict. Yeah, the more conflict, the more struggle, the more war. The more war, the more destruction of the infrastructure. So there was a very strong dichotomy in the community. In 570, the prophet's born. His father dies probably before he's born. His mother orphans him when he's less than 5 years old. He's raised by his uncle, Abu Talib. He has a cousin, but who functions more as a kind of stepbrother named Ali ibn Talib. I think he might have been on the Danny Thomas show for that vintage people. He grows up, tall, handsome, and very charismatic figure, but an orphan, right? When he's 25 years old, he's not yet married, so he marries a 40-year-old woman whose name is Khadija. And Khadija says to him, you have to go and see the world. You know, you have to go and find out what's going on. Otherwise, you're just a Meccan, and it's not enough. So she sends him on the caravans, right? We don't know exactly where he went. Maybe northern Saudi Arabia, maybe southern what we now call Israel, maybe into Egypt. We know that he learns certain things from the time, and he learns one thing in particular. What's the one thing he learns in particular? That the people of Mecca are poor, right? They're poorer than they should be. They should actually be prospering in a way that they are not prospering because, why, of course? They're fighting and they're destroying their infrastructure. And he decides that his mission is going to be to unify the people of Mecca, right? And the best way to unify a people is, this is a big insight for him, and it is an extraordinary insight. What's the best way to unify people? One God, right? We're going to be one. We're going to have one God. If we have one God, what are we going to be? One people, right? And if we're going to be one people, what will we speak? One language. And if we get everybody on the same page, what are we going to be? We're going to be one world, and it will be a world in which we collaborate and cooperate with each other, and that we can come together. I want to make that point. Everybody understand what I'm saying about that? A fundamental piece of the surrender, of the submission of Islam is unity. Unity, right? We are going to come and we're going to build a unity, right? And how is it to build a unity among the tchotchke dealers of Mecca? No, no. We're not going to do that. You know, we have our interests. We don't like that. And so we're not interested in what you're selling us. We want to build something that's going to be good for us, and we don't care about all the other people. We're pagans. Pagans are polytheistic by nature, and we just suffer with all the wars. It's utopian to think that we can end the wars by a single God, right? I use the word. I use it intentionally and in the appropriate idea. It's utopian, right? What do we think about utopian America? Good or bad? What's that? I don't know. What's that? It depends on your utopia. When we were kids, right, what do we learn? What do we read about utopia? We read Brave New World. How was it? Utopia. Bad, right? Then we read Lord of the Flies. How was Utopia? Bad. And then we read 1984. How was Utopia? Bad. In fact, we didn't read one. Maybe Thomas More wrote a book called Utopia. That was basically it, and he lost his head. So, we think utopia bad. What? In fact, when we were growing up, what was the utopian movement? Communism, right? Worldwide, you have nothing to lose but your chains. That was utopia. And what was that? That was bad. They were the enemy. And before that, what was the previous utopian movement? Nazism, right? Nazis. They were the Reich will last 1,000 years. That was utopia. This is not that kind of utopia exactly. This is a much older, right? Those lasted Nazism 50 years and communism 100 years before it morphed into what I consider to be radically something else for another day. Islam, 1,400 years. So this idea of the prophet, I call him the prophet out of respect, right? And so that, and I wouldn't change the habit anyways. So the prophet has an idea of utopia which is much greater, right? I'm going to get everybody on the same page. We're all going to have one God so we can become one people, speaking one language, and ultimately build one world, right? When he's about 40 years old, he goes out into the caves of Iran, and he goes into a cave, and the Inhel Jibril, the angel Gabriel, puts his arms around him and squeezes him, and he says, Kra, right? Kra. What's Kra? The Koreh? Call out. Maybe recite is the way it's translated, but call out, right? It's the Hebrew and Arabic are cognate languages, and you'll know many of the words. And all of a sudden, prophecy begins to tumble from him, and he now knows what to do. So he goes back in 621 to the Meccans, and he says, I have a lot of good prophecies for you. And they say, why don't you try and gather a tribe together? So where does he go? The parks, speaker's corner, like that. He gets people that are, not quite in the game, and he starts to build a community. And so what do they say to him? Leave or die. Leave or die. He then goes to a place called Yathrib, right? We call it Medina. And why do we call it Medina? Because it's golden. Golden Medina, right? It's Medina. What kind of word is Medina? It's a Hebrew word, a Jewish word, a word that we know, right? Yathrib we don't know, but Medina we do know. It could mean state, it could mean province, it could mean something like that. But anyways, here's the prophet, and he's going to this place with his motley crew of people, and he is going on his, and he's going to begin to build a community. But how is he going to build a community, right? It's this expulsion that he experiences, the hijra. Who else gets expelled? Expelled, right? In the Bible, many people, right? Abraham, leave, go out, right? Go to a place that you don't know. God tells him you have to leave, and Jacob is expelled, right? He flees for his life after his struggle with Esau, and Joseph is expelled, and he goes into. So the idea of exile and expulsion is a very strongly rooted religious understanding, and the prophet is part of that understanding. Good so far? Yes? We enjoying ourselves? It's Thursday night in Florida. Have to have at least a good time. So here's the prophet, and how do you go and build a religion? It's not so easy, right? I mean, he's put to himself a very high task. What's the high task? He's going to unite all of humanity, right? He's going to unite all of humanity. This will take some doing. By the way, what doesn't he have? The most important thing, AI. No internet, no cell phones, no microphones, no PowerPoints, nothing, right? What does he have? He's a tall, handsome guy with a good voice and a charismatic personality, and yet very attractive, right? He's attracting people. It will be better. Our life will be better. We'll be part of something. We have not been part of something in Medina, in Yathrib, and we will become part of something. This is an extraordinary moment. All right, now I want to try a thought experiment. Good? Who lives in Medina? Jews, and also Christians, right? The Christians are a certain kind of Christian. They're called Nestorian Christians. He's also met them when he was on his fabulous sophomore vacation, going with the caravans. I'm sure he didn't think about it that way, but he does know things, right? He's seen the world a bit. Khadija's not there with him yet, so he has other wives, and he has children. He's around 40 years old when he gets the first prophecy, and now he's around 52 years old at this moment of his life, and he's going to go out to at least unify Medina, right? I'm going to unify Medina. If I can't even unify Medina, then I'm certainly not going to get to unify the world, right? And I also need an experimental place to unify so I can learn how to unify communities together. And so he says, I'm going to try and unify the hardest group. And who is the hardest group? The Jews of Bethel of Boca Raton, exactly right. So, you know, what does he do? He has to meet the Jews some way. So who does he go to first? The AJC, the Arabian Jewish Committee. And what does the JDC do? What do they say to him? I want to join up. I want to link up. I have a number of followers. I want to link up. What do you think? You, Richard Cohen, what do you think? Would you say yes? Come on, you're on the spot. What? No. You would say no. You would say no, right? It didn't even take you a nanosecond. No. No, why? He's a lovely guy. Not one of us, right? Yeah, see, that is bad for his project, right? Is that bad for, and what does he think about you? I talked to Richard Cohen. He said no in the first second. He didn't even ask me a question. So who does he go to next? Of course, the Jewish Community Relations Council. Go to the Jewish Community. Now, maybe the Jewish Community Relations Council of 623, 624, Medina, not the greatest group, you know. If they were the greatest group, they would have been in the AJC, but no. He's going to ask them questions, and this is and who knows what's happening here, right? Is this a big turning point in the world? Yes. This is a big turning point in the world. So I'm going to ask you the question in a second, but this is a big moment, right? This guy has a number of followers. He has potential of many more followers. They even maybe ask him, how many followers are you expecting to have? 1.6 billion. Well, probably not until 2025, but you know, this is a moment in which Judaism will either be open or closed. And you right away said closed, right? Closed. How many people closed? Raise your hand. Closed. We're a small group, right? We, you know, big shuls, but you know, small numbers, small countries, short people. Maybe that's just me. Who would say yes? Nobody raised their hand? Nobody? Well, let's give them some tests, right? Let's give them some tests. We'll give them a few tests first. I now need to click a little. I think I just turned it off. This way. This is his timeline. We'll get to it. But you can see, right, we're now in the, I've never seen this till today, but Aileen found all sorts of amazing things for me. And this is one. This is the prophet's lifetime. I brought in this little sheet, which you can't see at all. Not a good prop, but the lifetime, very nice, right? So we're now in the second swirl, right? In the green side. Why green? It's a chiddur. Chiddur is the beautification. So the color of Judaism, what would you say? Blue. But the color of Islam? Green. That's why. In honor of this talk, I wore green socks against my wife's advice. She said, it's the only thing in your outfit that doesn't go. I said, Islam probably doesn't go. How come it didn't? Oh, there. Okay. All right. What's the first question that the Jews ask to see if you'll come in? It's always a good question. Circumcision. Circumcision. How does it usually go? Bad. Christians, how about you? Like, no one wants to and these are adults. It says circumcision. Would you mind becoming circumcised? That's usually the question that ends the conversation. What's the prophet's answer? Yes or no? He says yes. He says yes. We'll all be circumcised. And at what age do they circumcise? 8, 9, 13, depending where you live. But if you go down the streets in Istanbul, you see lots of kids that look like kings, right? They have magic wands, they have crowns, they have beautiful blue coats, and those are the kids that are just before they get circumcised. And then every once in a while you see another kid that's just after he gets circumcised. Really looks different. So sometimes they have beds on the street because it's an honor. I get that part, but it's a dubious distinction. We'll call that. So they say yes. What does the JCRC say? Well, that was a surprise. We didn't think you were really going to say yes. I mean, to such a question as circumcision. So what's the next question? Kashrut, of course. You probably like pigs, and also we don't eat any of that stuff. So what do they say? We'll give them up. Give it up. Circumcision, yes. And how about bacon? Not turkey, the real stuff. We giving them up? Give it up. Yeah, we'll do it. Whoa, these people are serious, right? They're serious, but still, Richard, what's the answer? Absolutely not, right? Anybody can get circumcised and give them pigs. I mean, it's not a big enough test, right? What is the big test? What's that? One God. One God. So they say to him, we believe in one God. That's the big thing. Here it is. See, it says Shahada. La ilah, Muhammadun Rasulillah. Good? Checking, pros. What does it mean? It's a very interesting phrase. It's a fantastic phrase. There is no God but Allah, but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Right? So maybe this fictional JCRC says to him, how about one God? Can you believe in one God? And what does he say? There is no God but God. There is no God but God. What do we say? We also have a phrase. What's our phrase? Shema Yisrael. What does Shema Yisrael mean? What does Shema Yisrael mean? The first two words. We'll do it 2 by 2. Hero Israel. Why? No, but why did we start off with Hero Israel? What should we have said? I suppose. If there's only one God, right? When we say one God, do we believe in what we call monotheism, which has been so popular for us for so many years, or monolatry, which means we have one God and you have one God, but our one God and your one God different? No, we don't believe that. We did maybe, right? You can see that we maybe did in Egypt, but now, no, right? When we say one God, what do we mean? One God for everyone, right? So how come we don't say Shema Kulanu, right? Why don't we say, listen, everybody? Why are we saying, hear, O Israel? Why is it a parochial concern, one God? So what do the Muslims say? And by the way, what's the second phrase? Hashem Elokeinu, as I say, even though I'm in the Reform Synagogue. God is our God. God is our God. What does it mean, God is our God? It's only for us? We have possession of this God, this thing? No. In Islam, La ilah, there is no God but God. It's clear, right? One God for everybody. That's it. No other gods, no matter who you are. Now, of course, ours comes from the Torah, from the book of Deuteronomy. It's much older, and it's an idea that's developing. But when they hear it, these Meccans, what do they think? They say, we really believe we're the real monotheistic people. If you want to join us, you can't say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You can't say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, because then the Lord isn't really one, right? The last phrase, which I love, the Lord is one, we all love oneness, it doesn't let you think that there's only one God in the world, and so they start to struggle a little bit about that, right? Circumcision, any controversy? Whatever the prophet says, that's what we're doing. Kashrut, any controversy? Whatever the prophet says, that's what we're doing. Monotheism, we wish you were like a little more monotheistic. Good? Yeah? You can see it's attractive, right? How about miracles? Do you have to believe in miracles? No. Nothing stupid. Nothing against nature, nothing that's going to push your mind in any way. What's the second one? Well, I know all this stuff. It's called the salat. So what's the next little test that we give them? How am I doing on this? Oh, good. What's the next little test that we give them? How many times a day do we have to pray? 3. So what do they say? 3, 5. But they do mincha ma'ariv together. It really only feels like 3. already we're feeling like, but what's good about the way they pray? Very short, very short. I was on the subway last week in Brooklyn, where I sometimes live, and between Nostrand Avenue and I can't remember the next one. One of the two stops by. One of the Muslim guys put himself right out on the side of the subway on the seats, prayed, and he was finished by the next stop. Like that. I thought that was good. A couple of years ago, I was in a taxi cab in New York, and there was a Pakistani guy. And I'm listening to the music, and I know it. It's the salat, right? It's the prayers, and he says, I said, "You're doing the prayers?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "It's very beautiful." He says, "Yeah, this is a special recording, 9 + 1, 9 + 1." I said, "What's 9 + 1?" He says, "We like to pray with 10 people. Sound familiar? But I want to be counted as one of the people, so I have 9 guys on the tape and me. I make the minyan in the taxi. Come on, it's crazy. I think we could use that. I feel we could use it. Maybe not, I like to be the Shekhinah, the divine presence, but still, it's a creative idea, right? So here we are. Monotheism, what do they say? Yes. Circumcision? Yes. Kashrut? Yes. Are you weakening? No. 5 prayers a day instead of 3. Okay, maybe we'll do 4. I don't know. We work it out. It's close enough, right? How about the Christians? They don't pray like that ever. So maybe they'll step it up a little bit. We'll see. Maybe Vespers can be Mincha. I don't know. We'll work it out in some way. So the prayer thing is very powerful, but very short prayers, right? When do they have the Shabbos? They say, why on Friday, though? Could have been Saturday was taken, right? Jews. I don't know if they want to push us so much. Shabbos is a recreation holiday, right? Most Jewish holidays are recreations. So Passover is a recreation of the Exodus from Egypt, and Sukkot is a recreation of going through the desert, and Shavuos is a recreation in some ways of the getting. And what's Shabbos a recreation of? Of the moment of creation, of the Garden of Eden, right? So we're going to go in the Garden of Eden. And does Shabbos, is it supposed to feel like you're in the Garden of Eden? And where in particular? Of course, Boca Raton. Because Budapest is like the Garden of Eden, but too cold. But that's tomorrow's talk. We won't get ahead of ourselves. Why have it on Sunday? If you're a Christian? It's Easter. Easter becomes on Sunday after they dedicate Sunday as the holy day, because it's the new week, right? We celebrate Shabbat on the last day of the week because we're in paradise. You work for 6 days, you're in paradise. Christians celebrate Shabbat on the first day of the week because you're declaring the new age, right, for the future. But Muslims say we are the religion of anticipation. Right? We are preparing for the future. We are going to build ourselves a religion that will anticipate some utopian state, right? So, but they say we can work this out. In one way or another, we can work it out. Okay, what's the third one they have? Zakat. What's zakat mean? First of all, what's it sound like? Tzedakah, right? Good or bad? Tzedakah. We love tzedakah, right? What could be better than tzedakah? What do they give? One thing I forgot to mention to you, I worked at UJA for 20 years. And so at the end of this talk, I will ask for pledges. No. But tzedakah, I used to say tzedakah is the most important mitzvah, but it isn't maybe, but I work for UJA. So, but the zakat is 2.5% of your gross income. It was kind of a tax also. They could have used the word waqf, right, which is the fund. Right? You could have given to the fund. What do they use? They use the word zakat because it sounds like tzedakah, right? And tzedakah is a certain kind of word. What does tzedakah mean? It doesn't mean, what's that? It means a righteous act. More than that, it means. It doesn't mean charity, right? Charity is from the word charitas in Greek, which means an act of love. And if you don't love the guy, you got to give him anyways. So it can't mean love, right? We don't let love go in here. Once I was in the subway station and I'm running and I'm late, and a guy says, "Can you give me some tzedakah?" So I say, "I'm just late," and he says, "Oh no, I see you wear that little hat. You have to empty up." So of course I gave him. I might not have been the first guy that did that. So the prayer, the belief, good enough. Prayer, good enough. Zakat, tzedakah, everybody has to give tzedakah, good. Checking in. Are you warming to them? You're warming to them, right? Yeah. Some tzaddik. Yeah, actually, it comes from the word tzedek, which means well-tempered, like a musical instrument, in tune, right? Tzedakah means you're in tune. You're giving the amount that you need to give in order to provide for the community's easy regulation. And he puts tzedakah in right from the beginning. It is a bit of a shtuch, it's a bit of a punch at the Meccans who at the time were seen as stingy. So the Medinians, where he's living, he's going to build a communal fund which he's going to distribute. So there's a backstory to it, and the three Jewish tribes that live in Medina, we know who they are: the Banu Kedukwa, the Banu Nadir, and the Banu Charisma. They also kick in, right? They're willing to do that. So far, sounding more familiar, right? Right. So maybe we would let them in. Who now thinks we should let them in? All right. So, see, we're not like that. Fourth one. Oh, thank you so much. That point saved my very sore neck. So, Psalm. What's the word in Hebrew? Anybody know? It's not as popular a word. Tzom. Like the day after Rosh Hashanah is called Tzom Gedalia, right? The fast of Gedalia. Or you say sometimes on Yom Kippur, Tzom Kal. Have an easy fast. So Tzom and Tzom, you can hear, same word, right? So they're really cognate. In Christianity has no such correspondence between Judaism and Christianity, but Judaism and Islam has an enormous amount of correspondence. And what is this fast? Right, we know it more popularly as the fast of Ramadan, right? What's the analog to 5 times, not 3 times? We tell them, listen, twice a year, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, we fast for the day. They say, you fast for a day? Fast for a month. Oh, these are serious people, fast for a month, right? And what is the point of the fast? I appreciate this is a delightful image of Islam, and there are many negative things, but I will get to them. Don't worry, I won't leave you without some of the more complicated things, and this is in some ways one of them, right? Ramadan is in some ways one of them. I was once the high holiday rabbi in Portland, Oregon, at the Orthodox synagogue in Portland, and because we don't use microphones, it's built in tiers, and I see on the 3rd tier that there's a guy in a white jalabia and a red fez. So I figured, renewal Jew, I figured that would be good. Some hippie or whatever. So, but he comes up to me during the break, the break on Yom Kippur afternoon, and he says, Rabbi, I get it. I get it. This service is about death, right? You're thinking about death on all the different services. But in your religion, where's the love? I can remember him so clear. He says, where's the love? Do you have love in your religion? And I looked at him and I say, Sukkot. We go in a little booth. We have a little suggestive shrub. We shake it a lot, thrusting. That's what it is. We circle like a bride. Sukkot. He says, oh, Sukkot. And what do you do in Sukkot? I said, we circumambulate, which I think is a word you can still say in mixed company. And we shake the lulav. He says, when we go on Hajj, we also circumambulate, and many people carry a palm frond. Do you think it comes from there? I said, I do think it comes from there. And he says to me, but what's the point? He's saying about his own religion. He says, what's the point of Ramadan? Where's the love? And I said, above my pay grade. I'm not answering a Muslim's question about where the love is. But I have a story about Ramadan, which is a powerful story to me. So in 1973, I'm still on my one-year program. My friend, Yakub, right? So now his name is Yakub. Then his name was Jackie. So he took this whole experience extremely seriously. And he and I are sitting in our Islam class, and we're not getting it, right? We're hearing lectures, but we're not feeling it, you know. So we go to the professor actually, and we say, where should we go that we can so we'll feel it, you know? And he says to us, go to the small town of La Azariya, which is on the downside of the hill in Jerusalem, and ask for a sheikh. Sheikh. That has to be good, right? Sheikh. And the guy's name is Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal. I still know him. I'm still in touch with him. And so we go see Sheikh Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal, right? And the first thing he says, you know, of course we'll drop everything for American college kids and entertain them, but it's Ramadan. Are you fasting? So he said, we didn't know it was Ramadan. So he says, well, if you want me to talk to you, then you have to fast. Of course. So it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. We fast. He tells us all sorts of amazing things. We're having a fantastic afternoon. And then the sun goes down. It's like February. It's pretty early. And then they have the break fast, you know, lox, bagels, iftar. They invite the rabbi. No, we got the rabbi. So they say to us, eat with us. And so we do. Wonderful. Well, I mean, this is like a college kid's dream, right? We're touching the authentic local color, whatever it is. And they say, and then Sheikh Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal says, come tomorrow, fast from dawn. Of course. So we go the next day, we fast from dawn. We have a wonderful day. We go to classes with them. We dance a little bit. Remember this story? Fabulous time. And he, you don't remember? I think I told you though. So we're dancing around, and at the end of the day, iftar, great. He says, come tomorrow. We say, nope, tomorrow you have to go to college. And he says, no. Third day is a charm. You have to come tomorrow and fast from dawn. So, okay, you know, the sheikh is saying this to us, you know, we blow off the class. We go and fast from dawn. We sit on a bench waiting for the sheikh, and the sheikh doesn't come out. Like, he's busy. Shocking for an American college kid. And lunchtime comes. I'm starving. Doesn't come out. We knock on the door. He says, I'm busy. Ignores us. What's going on here? Have we offended him, or he's certainly offending us? And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm really mad. Like, he made us come for the third day. We were going to go to college. He didn't come and talk to us the whole day. No fun stuff that we had done the first 2 days. And it's 3 o'clock, and I have a huge Yom Kippur headache. And he looks at me and he says, how do you feel? I said, well, I feel actually pretty pissed off. You know, like I'm elated because I haven't eaten for now 3 days during the day in a row, and I'm 20 and I have to eat a lot every day. But I'm also I'm suffering. You know, I'm suffering from this. He says, and how about your mind and your body? I said, yeah, I feel like they're tearing apart a bit. And he says, that's the meaning of Ramadan. You're practicing your death, right? And it's a brain death. It's a mind death. And if you do this for a month a year, a 12th of your life, and it circles throughout the year because there are only 351 days in an Islamic year, you will find that as you get older, your fear of death will be overcome. And I say to myself, wow. And I look at him and I say, like Yom Kippur. And he says, no, not like Yom Kippur. And I want to say to him, no, like Yom Kippur. He says, no. He says, I know a lot about Yom Kippur, not like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, you fast on Yom Kippur in order to change your life, right? You fast before it's too late. You do tshuva. We don't do that. We overcome our fear of death. On 9/11, there were some reports that were released at the end of the the day, and some of them they were letters from the people on the planes to their families, and they were signed, "We'll see you on Ramadan," which means there will be no death, and we will see you then. And if you think of a community of people, 1.6 billion in the world, that put a twelfth of their life, not everybody does it, I'm sure, but most people by far do it. Even secular Muslims do it, overcoming their fear of death. You think about that for a minute. You think what that is as a spiritual force, think about it as a political force, and think about it as a national force, right? A twelfth of your life, it's a lot of your life, right? Dedicated to overcoming your fear of death. If you ask most people, they will tell you that Ramadan is to feel empathy for the poor, right? But I've read deeply into it, and Sheikh Sidi Muhammad al-Jamal is correct. The overwhelming amount of medieval and early Islamic material says it is to overcome your fear of death. And I don't know about that. I think fear of death may be an important characteristic. So you just put that in the mind. What's the last pillar? Hajj. Hajj. How do we say it in Hebrew? Chag, right? As in, we all know this one. Chag Sameach, right? Hajj Sameach, like that. And what is Chag? What's a Chag? It's a pilgrimage holiday, right? You're moving on a pilgrimage, and so the Hajj is a pilgrimage, right? And why did he do the pilgrimage? What do you do in the pilgrimage? Now, in the beginning, you would do the Qibla, you would do the bowing, and you would bow towards Jerusalem. But after the fights with the Jews, which I'll talk about in 1 second, he abrogated it and turned it in another direction. Now I'm worried about the time. I have like 15 or 20 more minutes like that. We have a good time? I can just go on, right? I came all the way from Budapest. Blow on for a guy. Good. Are we having a good time? I'll blow on, all right? Okay. The Hajj, he understood, well, I'll ask you, I already said it to you. What's the main purpose of the submission of Islam? And also the overcoming of the fear of death, which plagues all humanity. We are going to be unified. The point is unity, right? And so if you go on the Hajj, like Malcolm X, remember Malcolm X? What happened to him when he went on the Hajj? He wrote very differently. He said, I didn't know. He said, I really didn't know that most Muslims weren't black and most Muslims weren't American, and how many Muslims there were, and how old. He didn't know any of that stuff. He goes on the Hajj, and he says, it's hard to be a racist. He said, I was a racist. It's hard to be a racist after you go on Hajj, because you see too many people that aren't like you, and they all circumambulate. They all go around the Kaaba, this box, this cube, in the same pace, and you begin to become unified with them, and you practice what the point was, right? Unity. Unity, unity, unity. Tawheed, 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 right? Unity, a kind of like a tariqat, like an approach to truth that is one. Unity is one. If you have many gods, you have many truths. But if you have one God, la ilah, then you have only one truth. And if you all come together, that's what will happen. That is a potent force, right? I think most Americans, they don't know enough about Islam, and when they ask about Islam, they don't understand why it would be attractive. But you can hear why it's attractive, right? You can hear that people in all over the world that do these 5 things, and some do other ones, can feel the unbelievable sense of unity and commitment and strength from each other. Good? All right. In the 6th, I have to get there in a little slower. And I have to drink some water. Very good water. Very cold. Thank you. In 632, the prophet, who is called the Insan al-Kamal, he's the pole man, right? He's the person that all other people can participate in, right? He's not a perfect man, and he's not a divine man. He is a Rasul, Muhammadun Rasul Illah, right? A Rasul. There are only 2 Rasuls in all of Islam. One is the prophet, and the other one is the star of the Quran, which is Moses, our guy, Moses. Moses is mentioned 36 times. The prophet's only mentioned 4 times, and 2 of those times he's called beloved, Ahmed. So Moses is If you look for a name that you read a lot in the Quran, this is a compilation of all of these transmissions, manifestations, verses, whatever is coming out of his mouth as he feels squeezed by the Inhel Jibril, by the angel Gabriel. This is the Quran, and he's mentioning Moses all the time. So in 632, he dies, right? It is not an unexpected occurrence. People die. He's a person. He's going to die, right? He's going to die, and who is going to take over for him? He's done some things that are quite remarkable, and so there's a succession. What are the things that he's done that are quite remarkable? In one way or another, he has unified Medina. How did he do that? There were 3 tribes in Medina that were particularly hard to include under the overall umbrella. And who do you think those people were? The Jews, right? And who did the Jews have business contracts in the tchotchke business with? The Meccans, right? So between the Meccans and the prophet, who did they pick? They picked the Meccans, right? And they had 3 different trades. One was spices. One was mostly the silk trade and other textiles, and the third one was transportation. They ran the caravans. The UPS and whatever delivery system of the 7th century. So the first one are the Banu Kanukwa, and they fight. Who's going to win in the fight? Well, no, you looked ahead, right? Who's supposed to win? I'm sorry to say that this is a crucial thing to know, right? Crucial thing to know. Who is supposed to win? The Jews. The Jews are an old people, and they're wealthy, and they have the AJC to protect them, and they have all sorts of other aspects because they are going to win the war. I mean, they are a much more established community. The Muslims are young, and we've rejected them, but they're still a ragtag group. And who does win the war? Now, Muslims. And what does that do for them? A few things. Number one, they get armaments, right? They don't have very good armaments, but from the Jews that they defeat, they get armaments. Second, they expel the Banu Nadir, Banu Kanukwa, to probably southern Syria. And the third thing is they get prestige, right? We beat the Jews, right? And if you beat the Jews, how do you beat the Jews? There's really only one way to beat the Jews. We all know this. How do you do it? I couldn't hear. Pick them out. No. It's not right. Only one way. You can kill them, doesn't kill the Jews. You can try them assimilation, doesn't kill the Jews. You can make them a business proposition, might. I don't know. Probably doesn't kill the Jews. They could convert. We never do that, right? I mean, maybe some, not many. We're going to do it a little later in this talk, probably in 5 more minutes. But no, the only way to kill the Jews is if God lets you. That's the only answer. If you go up against the Jews and you win, what do you know? God was on your side. I want to say that to you again. If you beat the Jews, who have better armaments and better generals and better personnel, and you win, what do you get to know? God is on your side. And then when you go to the Banu Nadir, and who's supposed to win? Very big tribe, the Banu Nadir. And who wins? The Meccans, the Muslims win. And if you beat the Banu Kanukwa and the Banu Nadir, what do you learn? God is on your side, and you can beat the rest of them, right? And so what happens to them? They get expelled, but they don't get expelled cheap, right? Everything gets stolen from them. They go to probably a place called Khaybar, and they suffer a lot more. And then the Banu Qurayza, what happens to them? If you go up and you fight the very tough and well-armed Banu Qurayza, what's going to happen to you? Of course, you're going to lose, right? And what happens to the Muslims? they win again. They win again. And if you can beat the Banu Qurayza, who's on your side? God is on your side. And so they massacre the Banu Qurayza. They massacre them. And they enslave their women and children. So you have to put all of this, and the Muslims feel God is on our side. And they don't ever begin to believe that God is not on their side for now. I'm gonna finish with the answer to that question. There's a battle called the Battle of Badr, right? Remember in Iraq there was a Badr brigade. And the Badr battle was the battle and then Yahud was the battle in which the Muslims from Medina fought the Meccans. And when the Muslims fought the Meccans, everybody thought the Meccans would win because it's a big city, they were going to win, but who won? The Muslims won because God was on their side. They dug a trench, the Battle of the Trench, they won. God was on their side. He finally, in 632, goes back into Mecca and he establishes himself. This is a major issue, right? I have two issues that I want to have you remember. The first one is that if you win wars, God is on your side. And the second one is that this is about unity. And then he dies, and who's going to take over? Right? Who's going to take over? No son. His son dies because he's the pole man, right? He's the man that everything happens to, including he has a son and the son dies. Right? Even that. So who's going to take over? Well, he has his brother, Ali, right? But what's wrong with Ali, right? How about Ali? It's not his brother exactly, it's a kind of stepbrother. What's wrong with Ali? Too religious. Ali, too much davening. Stop davening. This is impractical. We're building an empire here. We're going to unify the world, right? Don't give it to Ali. Ali's too frum. Cool? Right? Too frum. So who are we going to get it to? Abu Bakr. But Abu Bakr is old. He's a contemporary of the Prophet. He's a companion. They're called the Sahabi of the Prophet. He says Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr does something that had never been done before. What does he do? He unifies the entire Arabian Peninsula. You know the Arabian Peninsula? Yemen, Oman, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, all of it. Never been done before. And is there peace on the Arabian Peninsula under Abu Bakr? There's peace. Okay, now I have to show you something. We already did all this. That was the Hajj. You have to skip that. Where's the maps? Oh, here they are. So we often call this the Muslim conquest. Between the year 632 and the year 700, the Muslims come out of Medina into Mecca, and they build an empire on this map. Big or small? Very big. Very big. And how do they do that? What did we all learn in school? They killed everybody, of course. So if they killed everybody, who's the general? Do we remember his name? No, we don't remember his name because it's not true. They didn't kill everybody. What you see here is one of the greatest proletariat revolutions in the history of the world. I'm now going to tell you a little poem, right? Abu Bakr dies in 634. Everybody with me? I'm only trying to impress you by my command of dates because I was a one-year student at the Hebrew University. In 634, another person comes into view. His name is Amr, U-M-R. Everybody with me? Amr ibn al-Khattab. Come on. Do we all know the name? Amr ibn al-Khattab? I would like to say it with you in unison. Amr, come on. Amr ibn al-Khattab. Amr ibn al-Khattab. So there are many people at dinner and at bars that will tell you about Muslims, right? They'll tell you, they say, Muslims, they're good, they're bad, whatever. Mostly they're bad. And they claim to know a lot about Muslims, a lot. And so most of the time, if you ask them, so name two Muslims, not the Prophet, but one other Muslim from the beginning. No, they can't. So I want you to know at least one other guy, Amr ibn al-Khattab. He takes over from the Prophet in 634, and he goes to the Shat al-Arab. See, it's the dotted line between what's now Iran and Iraq, right on the top of the Persian Gulf. Everybody see it? It's swampy. And for the 100 years before 634, there had been a war between the Sassanid Empire, those are the Persians, and the Holy Roman Empire, those are the Byzantines. Sassanids and Byzantines, right? And how'd the war go? On. It went on and on and on, and it drained their wealth, and it drained their energy, and it drained their creativity, and they did get some spices probably, who knows. But anyways, it was a terrible 100-year war. So all of a sudden, they figure we'll have a truce and recoup. You know, we'll recover a little bit. We'll go home. We'll get some sleep. You know, we'll get a new uniform, whatever, and then we'll come back and we'll probably fight again. You know, it was an insoluble war, and the bishop of Jerusalem, a man named Sophronius, was the leader of the Byzantines at the time, and here comes the Meccans. Here comes the Muslims. Who are the Muslims? No one even heard of the Muslims. There's a cloud of dust coming from the Arabian Peninsula, and all of a sudden they come to the Shatt al-Arab. And at the Shatt al-Arab, there are all these Sassanid soldiers that are supposed to hold the fort against this absolutely huge Muslim army. We still having a good time? Yeah? This is a good story. You like this story. I'm now going to recite you a poem, but I will not do it in Persian because, A, you won't understand it, and B, I can't. But I will say it to you in English, right? So here's Ahmed ibn al-Khattab. He's part of the 4 early caliphs, the 4 leaders of Islam, who are called the Rashidun. And he says, who are you fighting for? We're fighting for the Sultan. And where is the Sultan? The Sultan's in his palace. And what's the Sultan sleeping on? He's sleeping on his silk sheets. And who is he sleeping with? He's sleeping with his harem. And where are you? We're here with you in the swamp. And who are you fighting? And where are you going to sleep? We're going to sleep in the swamp. And who are you going to sleep with? We're going to sleep alone. Then you fight with me. It's a powerful poem. School children can recite this poem. I asked a kid in the streets of Istanbul, recite the poem, and he recited the poem. Because that is, if you want to know how the Islamic world expands, it expands that way. There's good parts and bad parts, right? They steamrolled over a lot of individual communities, including sometimes us, but mostly not us. Mostly not us for the following reason. In 680, there's a struggle. This is another important point. I have like 15 more minutes, like that? 5 more minutes? Okay. Then we're not doing this. I was going to explain the split right now, but first I have to do this. This is called the Fatiha. How do you say open in Hebrew? The Ftoach, right? Fatiha, same word. Here it goes. Oh, I can read it from there. No. Yeah, all praise belongs to God, Lord of all worlds, a compassionate, the merciful, the ruler of Judgment Day. It is you that we worship, and it is you we appeal for help. Show us the right way, in the way of those who have graced, not of those who have, of whom is your wrath, nor those who would wander astray. In other words, what? You will be held accountable for your deeds. You will be held accountable if you become an enemy. Because even though God is merciful and compassionate, and all praise belongs to that God, ruler of all the earth, you will have to become part of that. And if you don't become part of that, there'll be no space for you. The split. Ready for the split? In 680, 2 more guys, Uthman, right? And then finally Ali, right, the religious guy. They become the caliph. But then, as Ali's getting older, there's a person in Damascus, and he, and his name is Muawiyah, and Muawiyah has a son whose name is Yazid. And he says, if you don't go and kill the sons of the Prophet and of Ali, you'll be killed, right? Because that's the way it goes. We're going to struggle over the kingdom. And Ali has a religious perspective, right? a lot of davening. But Muawiyah has a political perspective. So he says, Yazid, go and kill. He says, I'm not going to go. Yazid says, I'm not going to kill the family of the prophet. That's a crazy idea. And Muawiyah says to him, oh, yes, you are. It's the will of God. You have to do this. And he says, if it's the will of God for me to kill, I'll kill. Ali says to Hussein, he says, you have to go fight in a place called Karbala. You have to fight Yazid. And he says, I can't fight Yazid. Yazid is very strong, and I'm not going to be able to fight. I'm not going to win, and it will embarrass everybody. And Ali says to him, if it is the will of God that you will die, then you will die. Here's the difference. Yazid and Muawiyah are the leaders of the Sunnis. The Sunnis. Sunnah comes from tradition. The word Sunnah means tradition, like Masorah, or even Mishnah. But Shia are much more religious. So Sunnis have presidents and kings and all the things that we think, and Shiites have what? Ayatollahs, right? They have prophets. They have holy people. They have imams, right? 6th imam and the 12th imam. It's for another day. But it's important to hear the distinction, and it's important to know that those are inbred into the piece. All right. I want to finish something for 2 minutes, then I'm going to try and do some questions. Yeah. Good. Here's the final 2 minutes. Everybody with me? Good. Yes. Okay. Here's the final 2 minutes. What happened? What happened? If you believe in one God, and therefore one people, with one language and one world, then nothing can be outside of your purview. Nothing can be dismissed, right? So if you're a scientist and there's a book by a guy named Ptolemy or Aristotle, what do you do with it? You translate it, and you comment on it, and you adjust to it, everything. So in the Middle Ages, because of this radical commitment to unity, it was the greatest scientific age that the world had seen, based on Greek wisdom, Aristotle and Galen and like that. That was my field of study. I studied Islamic science, right? If you're a Christian and it's more belief than observation, what do you do with Aristotle? And what did they do with Aristotle? You burn the books. And if you're a Jew, what do you do with those books? You'll be surprised by this. You comment on them. Because we have a few comments. And if you're a later Jew, what do? You comment on the comments. Hey, Maimonides, I have a few comments like that. Because my mother said, Michael, enough comments. But I never stopped. So there it is. I said, I have to make a living. More comments. So you have this flowering. Then what happened? Why do we have Islam now, which is by, I think, any measurement that we would believe in terrible shape? Well, in the 18th century, there was a man named Aleph Khani, late 18th, early 19th century, and he said something dramatic. Something dramatic happened. What happened? Napoleon, remember Napoleon, the guy? Napoleon from France. He needs some good headlines at home. This is actually true. That's why he did it, more than any other reason that we can find. Good books written on that. He goes to Cairo, and he sacks Cairo. Right? Breaks things down. Doesn't blow the nose off the Sphinx. That was erosion. But plenty of stuff. What does that mean? Here's a quiz. What's that? God's not on our side. Because if God was on our side, what would happen? We'd win. And which Muslim country in the world used to be Muslim and is no longer Muslim? Right now, today. Which Muslim country? Spain? That's one. Come on, the one we know. Israel. No, Morocco, Muslim. Israel, how's it going? Jewish. I think Jewish. But not easy. What's that? Israel Jewish. Used to be Muslim, of course. Was Muslim and Muslim and Muslim. Well, we'll call it the Yugoslavia part of it, right? Turkey, Muslim. Can't include Turkey, but Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, these used to be Islam, and now Kashmir would be another one. What else? I care about. How about the Stanley family? Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, my uncle Stan, Stanley Hardware. All of them. How about them? They were all communist countries, and now what are they again? Muslim countries. And what does Osama bin Laden say? The only way we lose is if God turns his back on us. And so what did he do? He brought down the Soviet Union. He brought down the Soviet Union. I don't believe that. Why do I not believe that? Because we know for a fact, as read in the New York Times, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe brought down the Soviet Union, so it can't be. But there are many people in the world that do think he brought down the Soviet Union because he was behaving in such a way that God came back to the side. Al-Afghani says, if we're losing, it's because we are not behaving in a way that God wants us to, and we have to turn around and go backwards. And his student, Rashid Ridda, he says the same thing, and much more effectively. And then there's a guy named Said Qutb. He comes to America because America has thrown off its colonial status. And he goes to the University of Northern Colorado, and he finds debauchery in the 1920s, and he becomes a fundamentalist, and he writes a long commentary, and he says, no, I want to go back to the 7th century. And in the 7th century, what proved that the Muslims had God on their side? They beat the 3 Jewish tribes. And they beat the 3 Jewish tribes because they felt the Jewish tribes were fundamentally weak. And so there were leaders in the Islamic world, Said Qutb the most, that said that if the Jewish state comes and you can't beat it, what will you know? God is not on your side, right? I don't care if they're smart or dumb or rich or poor. God is not on your side if you can't beat these guys. It's a little schlepper country. Beat those guys. And this is a difficulty in the world. We can't have a force. Now, how many people believe that? Only, I think, about 10% of the Muslims. There are 1.6 billion Muslims. So it's only like 160 million people. But, 160 million people, turns out it's quite a lot of people. So, so I want to take this time to build the beauty of Islam. I hope I did that. And also the difficulties of Islam, what it means to live in the modern world in that way. So, because I'm out of time, I'm stopping. Thank you.
So we have a few questions which we will sort of draw together. But first, can you talk a little bit about the history of how people who were not Muslim fared in Muslim societies and how that changed over time?
So in the beginning, it was the pagan movements were I'll start another way because it'll be shorter. They saw the time before the Prophet. It's called in Arabic the jahiliyyah, the innocence, the ignorance, the great ignorance. And they didn't just bring Islam to the world; they brought learning to the world. Right? We are going to be rational. There's no miracles that are unbearable to believe in Islam. And so in the jahiliyyah, the people that believed in pagan objects were the first to go. There were only 3 peoples that were protected against that, and they were Jews, Christians, and Sabaeans, who are kind of like a Zoroastrian Persian understanding. And those people were called the al-Kitab, the people of writing, the people with the scripture. And those people were spared all of this, but the rest were to build the background world of Islam that would be of great unity, and that was, at least for more than 1,000 years, a fantastic success. If you study Maimonides and you ask yourself why he never came to Christian lands except when he went to the Holy Land by accident, almost by accident, he didn't really know. It seems clear that he really didn't know it was under Crusader hands. He only lived in the world of Islam, and he lived in the world of Islam because they were a rational population, and he thought the Christians were not. And so the way they treated the people from the Jahiliyyah was sometimes brutal, but often they converted them because it was like joining the winning team. One of the main times that happened to Jews is in the year 750. In the year 750, there was a new dynasty that came in Baghdad. It was called the Abbasid dynasty. And the Abbasid dynasty said, we're going to study and we're going to build universities, One was called Cambridge, I think, maybe Oxford, Harvard, something like that. Those kind of universities. And they said to the Jews, would you like to teach in our universities? And what did the Jews say? Yes, we would. So those are the people that began to build the legal infrastructure, but it was also the largest conversion out of Judaism that we've ever had. So that by the time of Maimonides, we had gone down to around 250,000 Jews left in the world. Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed was to say that we were as rational as the Muslims. And if you read the Guide for the Perplexed carefully, that was the point of it, right? We are going to explain to you that we are not pagans, that we are not going to be absorbed into the Borg, absorbed into Islam, but we're going to have our own people, and our people will have a rational background. That's a fast answer, but that was it.
We're going to move forward in history about a millennium and a half. How might the modernization of the Arab states undermine the tenets of Islam?
So the modernization is based on a fundamental principle, which is that you can learn more from the parts than the whole, right? If you think about Roger Bacon, the founder of science, of scientific method, he wrote a book called The New Organon. And the first line of The New Organon is, we will take nature, we will vex it, so it will yield its secrets, and we can manipulate it, right? That is the beginning of what we'll call the Enlightenment, right? And it is incredibly productive. If you wanted to invent or discover penicillin, that's the way to go. If you want to know why my many heart medications now that I have to take, how long do I have to take them, my doctor? For the rest of your life. Those are developed because they read my numbers and things like that. They didn't say, well, Michael, how much tzedakah did you give this year? Or like, are you a good guy? Do you like your children? No. I see that your heart rate, your blood pressure's up, and now we're going to cope with it. Islam did not make that decision. In order for them to catch up, if the word is appropriate, it's kind of not appropriate, they have to do that. They have to join the modern world, or they're going to be the stepchild, and a dangerous stepchild of the modern world for a very long time. The modern world, modernity, one more thing, which is the same moment in some ways. Freedom of speech is the individual trumping the society, right? I get to say whatever I want, no matter if it pisses you off or not. I get to say no matter what I want to say, I get to say it. In Islam, they say, no, you don't. No, you don't. You get to be part of the community, and you only get to be part of the community. What you see on the streets of Tehran right now is that, right? We want to be moderns. It's not just that they don't want the Ayatollahs anymore. They want to be moderns, right? We lived in a sophisticated society. We want it back. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 started by the burning up of cinemas, right? Of film studios and cinemas is the right word, because that was bringing too much modernity in, and they said no modernity. You get out, and we'll preserve Islam. And there is a real struggle with that. There's no doubt there's a struggle with that. Is there a compromise position between the two? Very hard to see one immediately. Maybe. That if you ask me what should be the Muslims, what they're working on, it's that. In the Islamic law that unfolds, they say, what do you do if the law doesn't cover, microwaves, on Shabbos? So one of the things is ijma. We're going to get a consensus of the people. Who thinks it is, who thinks it isn't? And then, if you can't do that, then you use a thing called ijtihad, right? Which means opening up the gates to re-understanding the Islamic law. But in the modern world, particularly in the eastern part of the modern world, of the modern world, Indonesia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, places like that, the gate of ijtihad has been closed and abolished, right? So that means that the Muslims are stuck 100 years ago, and it wasn't good 100 years ago, right? It was just after Napoleon. So they are still struggling with that. They are still struggling with the fact that if we lost to Napoleon, then God, and then to Nelson right after, then God is not on our side. We have to grab God back, and that is a motivating factor of a huge population in the world.
We're going to have two other quick questions, and then we'll have time for coffee and cookies, which is why everyone comes to Temple Bethel. The first is, can you talk about, you've spent a lot of time this evening talking about how Muhammad tried to figure out politically how to organize and subdue the tribes of Medina and then later in Mecca, and then how Islam nationally spread from Arabia all over North Africa and created the caliphate, and sort of the reality of where Islam spreads from Indonesia all the way to North Africa.
Yeah, to Morocco.
Right. But can you talk about sort of the distinguishing features between Islam as a religion or Islam in its in the politics? As you know,
Yeah.
the question was: is Islam really a religion or is it a political movement? It's obviously both, but can you distinguish or talk about how those two things are woven together?
I can. So as you say, absolutely correctly, it's obviously a politic, a sociology, a society, and a religion. All those things, and it's the same as if you ask, are Jews a people or a religion? Of course, none of us think that that's the right question, and Muslims don't think about it either. But there was a piece of genius that the Prophet did almost at the beginning of Islam, which is to say, believe the 5 things I told you. If you believe all the things I told you, right, and you do those things, you're on your own, right? If you live in the middle of Africa and you want to do treat women in one way or another, you're on your own, right? If you want to live in Iran and you want to write poetry and do science, you're on your own, right? If you want to live in Indonesia and you want to live in a radically different kind of society, you're on your own. So what he did is he tried to build a unifying theme across Islam, and then he said, it will be beyond Islam to stop things, right? To stop the way local people behave. This is good in some way and very bad in other ways, right? What it meant is that when the Prophet was alive, they used to expose girls, right? They used to kill women because baby girls, because people wanted boys. They were more economically advantageous, and they needed them. I'm not making fun of them. I am making fun of them. I'm making fun of them. It's a moral failure in the first degree. But the Prophet stopped that. But he didn't stop the treatment of women, right? Because he said that's a local concern. We won't do it. You won't find in the Quran or the Sunnah, the Hadith, the Ijma, the Ijtihad, all of the things that we find most complicated with women in terms of women in Islam. I kind of regret it, right? I wish that there would have been some Badawi tried a little bit. No, you don't have it, and so many people have suffered in the world because of that. That is where the politics kicks in. He is trying to do something amazing, which is keep 1.6 billion people now. But anyways, this whole map, I think the map is still there. Oh, anyways, when the map was there, together, and it would not have happened if he didn't have also local control. But what that meant was the fitna. The fitna were the civil wars that would go on over custom, over grammar sometimes, and that let out some of the steam of the conflict. But sometimes it got out of hand, and right now it's getting out of hand. So I regret that, but I know that that's the right that was the answer of the Prophet also. We'll leave the politics local, and the religious infrastructure, which is what I most explained to you, will be a demand universally.
So we'll end with this, and it may pick up on what you're just discussing. Many Jews, when we think of Islam, we think of Arab Muslims in the Middle East and around Israel. But we also know the largest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. So could you say a little bit about how it was that Islam spread to various parts of the world and what some of the differences are between Muslims of the farther east, the Middle East, the West, wherever else?
Yeah, for sure. Only 13% of all Muslims are Arabs, right? Very small percentage, and it's good to remember that. There was these things, including the Hajj, by the way, unified the caliphate. I don't want to call it the empire because it sounds like Star Wars, great movie, by the way. But it is in some ways. It's beyond an empire. It's much too big, much too multifaceted. But if you go to Samarkand and Tashkent and Baku, you see a much more iconography, right? And if you go to Indonesia, much more of a closed educational society. They really control those things. If you go to Morocco, in the Maghreb, it was mostly more progressive. So each area had that, and in some ways there was animosity. I think it'd be good for us in America, by the way. I think if the Jews of Florida held the Jews of Minnesota in contempt, it would help us, you know? Like if we didn't, it would get us past the conservative Reform Orthodox. We could have regional, you know, like people from California are whiffy, people from Boston are stingy, whatever it would be. You know, I think it worked. And in Islam, that was true. But remember, they're coming once a year from all over the world and learning from each other. This is like such a crazy thing to say, but Muslims want to be a global society. There are very few people that understood global societies in Jewish life, and we know about them better than Chabad, right? The only place that, you know, I don't know if there's a shul in Tashkent. Oh, no, don't worry, there'll be a Chabad, you know? And how about Jackson Hole, Wyoming? Don't worry, there'll be a Chabad. And they'll all wear the same hat and a long coat and have 17 children, and we'll feel at home, even though we don't go to Chabad, really, you know, in our regular lives. And B, we don't know why they have them in all those places. The reason they had them in all those places was that the Rebbe thought that our guards were down in the 1940s, and that's why we lost half of our population. Our guards were down. He said, never should be another moment when we don't have information from every place. And Islam was the same way. It was a highly resilient society. So the Jews of Senegal, the Muslims of Senegal, the Muslims from Egypt, and the Muslims from India, remember the biggest Muslim country is India. The biggest country that's run by Muslims is Indonesia. It's a distinction, you know, but anyways, that's how it is. If we bind these people together, we can build a vision that will sustain us. Mahathir Mohamad, I always make the mistake. He was the president of Malaysia. He's a very brilliant man. He was an anti-Semite, good and strong. But he did say some important things about this. He said, look at the Jews. Jews are everywhere. They invented psychology and democracy, who knows, nuclear. They invented everything. We invented nothing because we don't have good information systems, and they live everywhere. They drain their information from the local community, and then they share it with each other in their clubs. I don't know where those clubs are, so I'm not sure it's true, but I want to go to them also. The Worldwide Jewish Conspiracy, I want my card. But the Muslims did really try and do that because they were in charge, and they could do that. And that was a piece of genius. Thank you. This is my card. Oh my God! I didn't think I was going to get a card tonight. It says Jewish Space Laser. That was when we didn't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Well, now maybe we like her better. Thank you for that. That's the card. I think they used to say that during the Aleinu, the Jews, change information. I don't know. It's a very important question, and there are wonderful books written on it. The best one is by my teacher. His name is Syed Hossein Nasser, and his book is called Ideals and Realities in Islam. I named this lecture Ideals and Realities in Islam so I could say this. So just look up Ideals and Realities in Islam. It's a very powerful understanding of Islam, but he's a Muslim, so none of the negative parts. I see some of the negative parts. Thank you so much. I really love it.
Please stay for coffee and yum. A reminder, tomorrow evening services are at 6 p.m., not 7:30, at 6 p.m. With the dinner to follow. And then again, please join us on Shabbat morning at 9:30 for continued opportunities to learn with Rabbi Paley. Thank you all for coming tonight.
One announcement, which is that I want to thank Eileen Spilka from the synagogue for doing such an amazing job on the slide protection. And I do not want anybody, this is really an important thing, to tell her that I didn't get to a lot of the slides. Because, I feel bad about that, because she did great. That's just between us.